Let me share with you 3 of my best all-time driver videos. You know, driving doesn't have to be that complicated, especially when you get some of the secrets that I'm going to share with you here. Let's go and get started. All right, what a cool driving range, a cool course we're at here. This is Orange County National, home of America's largest driving range. This thing is pretty neat. It's over 400 yards across this with tee boxes all the way around. Really cool courses. They hold the Q School for the Corn Ferry Tour to get your PGA Tour card here this year. So really cool spot. Thought it'd be really fun to come out and shoot a video here. Well, in this one, I'm going to talk about how you can shallow out your swing so that you stop coming down steep, and how that can really help you to unlock a lot of swing speed that you have built up inside. Now, what happens a lot of times, let me go ahead and tee up one more ball here. You'll see that if you're getting a little bit steep, it's usually a right arm wanting to push that club and accelerate the club. And early in the downswing, you're gonna see this club shaft is pointing well inside the golf ball. So if you look at where that's pointing, if I just kept swinging down that direction, I would slam this club into the ground 2-3 feet behind the golf ball. Obviously, that's not gonna work. So when this right arm gets overactive or active in the wrong way, we're gonna go over the right way here in a second. When it gets overactive in the wrong way, I have to slow down my swing, reroute this club shaft to get it kind of shallowed out. I usually stand up and flip to kind of help that action happen, and you lose a lot of swing speed. All that slowing down to reroute the club could have been acceleration if you're already in the slot, just accelerating all the way through the golf ball. That's what we're gonna go over in this video. Now, one of the biggest things that I see players struggle with, and they'll ask me, Clay, you know, I get that you're supposed to be shallowing this club out. I get that the logo of your left hand is toward the sky, that I want to kind of roll this arm in, but I just can't feel anything with my left hand. I don't feel comfortable doing that. That's why in this video, we're going to focus all in on the right hand. What does the right hand do? And I found that you're probably going to have a lot more success focusing on the right hand versus the left hand. Then you can kind of blend it all in together, and it's going to feel natural here after a while. So what I mentioned there and what happens when you're coming a little bit steep is typically in the takeaway, you're going to bring the club inside, and then the right hand is going to push that club into a steeper position here. Now, it doesn't mean that you're coming over the top. You may be steep and still coming from the inside, just standing up like that. That can be happening. It doesn't mean that you have an over-the-top slice. You may have an over-the-top slice, or you may even have a hook doing this. What we're talking about here is the steepness of the shaft. That's when that club comes back a little inside, the right hand pushes the shaft steeper, and then from there we reroute. We want to reverse that. So go ahead and drop the club and just take your right hand. Now to dress, if I take it inside, my right wrist is bending back. These knuckles of my right wrist are bending back. That's called wrist extension. That's your knuckles towards your elbow. I want to feel like my right wrist is pretty flat as I'm going into the backswing. So I'm going to do a few reps feeling like it's flat, and then going ahead and making my swing. Now you can do these right from your living room. Go ahead and make a good 10 or 15 swings, just focusing on that. We're gonna build this in a progression, layer by layer. I don't wanna go ahead and do everything all at once. We got to make a few swings to get comfortable with this. So here, I'm just gonna focus in on my right wrist being flat in the first part of the backswing. I'm gonna do that by turning my body and letting that move the club versus me picking it up with my hands and wrist and dragging it to the inside. So I'm gonna do 10 or 15 practice swings like that, and then I'll go ahead and hit a golf ball here. There you go, another one, nice and solid. That would be down the left center of the fairway there, so good swing. So do the practice swings, then go ahead, if you're at a driving range, hit a few balls doing that. If you're at home, just do the practice swings and you'll be well on your way when you go to the driving range. Now piece number 2, let's add to that now. Go through this progression. My right wrist is flat going back, and you can kind of see that would be kind of flat, or like I was shaking someone's hand here. As I start down, here's what I want you to feel, and this is exaggerated, but this is really key to shallowing it out. I want you to feel like as your body opens, your palm is toward the sky. So that's really going to take this club from here to there in the downswing. Now that's exaggerated. That's too much. You're not going to get that shallow, and I don't want you to, but that's the feeling you're going to have as you finish the backswing and start the downswing to really get that club to move in the proper way. Now from there, I'm going to do another 10 or 15 practice swings, and that's really going to help me to come more from this way. Now the mistake that I think a lot of people assume is that if I get this club more from the inside, that means I'm going to swing way out to the right, and that's simply not the case. My hand is opening up, and then I'm going to be releasing that to square up the face. Once my palm opens, that's in a good shallow inside position, and now I'm going to release it. This is what all the great pros are doing that I see a lot of players that struggle don't do. They're taking this club from the inside and then releasing that to square it up. So my palm goes from open here to square, releasing through the target, and then coming on through. If you're looking at it from the camera angle here, my palm's going from open to going ahead and releasing to square and then coming on through. So I'm going to do a good 10 to 15 reps of that. Let's go ahead and hit another golf ball here and notice how that club definitely shallows out in the transition. And I'm coming from the inside, but I'm not hitting a massive hook or really swinging way out to the right. I'm swinging squarely through the ball because I'm releasing that hand. Let's go ahead and try it out here. There we go, pretty solid. So the last piece of this and the final question I get here is, well, won't my club face be open if I do that? So when my palm is up, won't this face be open and out of position here? And actually, to solve that, that is true. You're gonna get a little bit of this move. Some people call it the motorcycle move where you're twisting your wrist. That would be me turning this club this way. But that move, when I'm shallow, this is closing the face. So if I took this club and I twist it toward the camera, that's closing the face, that's opening the face. So I want to have that palm up and my knuckles back like that. That's really the key. That's the last piece that kind of ties this in together. I'm getting the club from the inside and then I'm getting those knuckles back to square the face up. So that looks like this. Again, all three pieces together. I'm gonna go really slow for you. Backswing, wrist is nice and flat. That's gonna get me on a great backswing position. Second piece, as I finish my backswing and start my downswing, I'm gonna feel like my palm is up toward the sky. Third piece, I'm squaring that up. So as I open my hand, my knuckles are rolling back. So it looks like this. I'm gonna go real slow and show what that would look like. That's why you see so many pros with their left wrist bowed. That's why you see so many pros with this elbow tucked in. That's why you see so many pros coming from the inside. It's that wrist move that I'm talking about there. Get those three pieces together. Again, make another 10 or 15 swings, and you're gonna really be able to feel like now from the top of the swing, you can accelerate all the way through the downswing because you don't have to reroute it. The club is already shallowed out on the angle that it needs to be on in the downswing. So let's go ahead and crank one more here. See just how far I can get this one to go. I'm really gonna accelerate through it. All right, I hit that one, awesome. All right, so shallowing the club, and by shallowing, I mean getting this club in this kind of flatter position here. Some people would call it in the slot. Some people would call it, you know, kind of shallow or laid off. If that's so good, then why do we see a lot of great players throughout history? Players like Jack Nicklaus, who were a little bit across the line at the top of the backswing. So at the end of the backswing, you'll see their club, instead of pointing to the target, it's going to be pointing a little bit to the right of the target. Players like Greg Norman also did this. Even if you go back and look at Tiger Woods from the late 90s, you'll see before he made some of his swing changes, that club pointing a little bit across the line. Some of those players like Fred Couples, not only going a little across the line, but actually going a little past parallel. Why do you see so many really good players with their club pointing that way at the top of the backswing if this shallow position or getting in the slot is so good? Shouldn't their club at the top of the backswing be pointing more on plane or even a little bit laid off? Wouldn't that make more sense? Well, that's a post that I saw recently from a fellow golf instructor, and it kind of got me on this idea of explaining when is the proper time to shallow, how much should we do, what's the easiest way to go about it, and how do we know if we're doing it right? I'm gonna cover all that in this video. All right, so here's the number one difference. When we're talking about shallowing out this club, we're talking about the downswing, not the backswing or the top of the swing. It's actually completely fine to have a little bit of a more upright backswing. You don't have to have this club going shallow in the backswing. And it's completely fine to have that club a little bit across the line at the top, or even a lot of it across the line at the top, as long as you give yourself time to shallow that as you start the downswing. And here's exactly what shallow means. And I have a great, very easy way for you to test this with your own swing that I'm going to talk about later in this video. But here's exactly what I mean when I'm talking about shallowing in the golf swing. So if I make this swing, as soon as I start my downswing, I'm looking at the path that my hands are taking. So this angle that my hands are moving as I'm making the downswing. And somewhere early in the downswing, so somewhere here around shoulder height, I would like to see that club on a flatter angle than where my hands are moving. So I'm gonna really exaggerate it here. If my hands are moving this way, this angle here, I like to see my club head on a flatter angle of that. It doesn't have to be nearly this exaggerated. A little bit is plenty fine, but I want to see it a little bit shallower than that. Here's the reason why. When I get that club a little bit below my hands, what happens is, as I move my hands in the downswing, that wants to kick that club forward. It's help aiding that club in squaring up and releasing toward this golf ball. And there's a great way I can demonstrate this. If I have a club kind of laid off here, pointing this way, I'm going to take my hand and I'm going to pull that club straight toward the fairway in the distance here. So since my club is shallower or to the right side of this from my perspective, as I pull this club, you'll notice that it wants to kick toward the direction I'm pulling. That's kind of like my hand path moving in the downswing. That club's wanting to kick forward, help release the club, help to release this club face. If I go ahead and put the club the opposite direction, and now I do that same thing. I pull my hand straight toward the fairway again. What's that club want to do? It wants to kick the opposite way. So it's going to want to move more this way if my club is pointing more this way. So let's take that into the downswing now. If I go to the start of the downswing, my hands are moving this way. My club is shallower. What wants to happen to that club? It wants to square up. It wants to release the face. It wants to make it easier to get in the slot and hit the draw like a lot of players want to hit. Now let's do the opposite. Let's imagine that my hands are moving the exact same direction, but now that club is steeper. Well, as my hands move down now in this direction, that club shaft wants to go this way. It wants to fall in behind me. It wants to get stuck behind my body. It wants to make me hit that 50 or 60 yard block out to the right, what would be in the water on this hole. It makes things more difficult. It makes it easier to hit that slice, which is what a lot of players don't particularly want to do. So that's the reason for shallowing. It's not a backswing move. It's not a top of the swing move. It's an early in the downswing. So I like to look at it when my hands are about shoulder height here. I want to see that club shallower than what my hands are doing. That means it's going to aid in releasing this golf club. Now I'm going to give you a surefire way to figure out if you're doing this correctly or not. What we're going to do is you want to set up your camera. Have just your cell phone is completely fine. Have somebody take video for you. And I want to imagine, or I want to actually draw a line on there when I'm editing this, but I'm going to line up to where I'm going to hit it, and I'm going to draw a line from the hosel of my club up through my elbow, my right elbow at address. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my camera up kind of on that line. So I want the person videotaping my swing to have the camera about waist high and pointing down my toes. So it would basically be shooting directly through that red line toward the target. That's how we'd set it up. So basically waist high with the camera, pointing down your toes and toward the target. So if I'm splitting those two big trees out in the distance, I'd be pointing my camera down my toes and toward those two trees that I'm trying to split. That's how I'd line up my camera. Now if you do this, that's going to put your camera on the same plane that we're trying to visualize here. And if you're shallow, what will be happening is the club head will get below this red line. If I'm steep in the early downswing, this club head will be above that red line. If you're above that red line, typically what's going to end up happening is that club's going to want to do this later in the downswing. It's going to get stuck in behind you. If you're below that red line, the club's going to want to do this in the downswing, kick out in front and release to help aid you in hitting that draw. So let's go ahead and give one a whirl here. I'm going to set up. You'll see how that red line's going through the hosel of my club, up through my right elbow, and now I'm in a good position to where I can hit a nice solid draw. All right, so we'll see from that one, going right down the middle of the fairway, nice straight shot, hit it very solid. That helps to be shallowing that out early in the swing. We can definitely see as my club head is coming down, the main thing I'm looking for is at some point, maybe halfway in the downswing, or as I'm starting that downswing, I want to get that club head below that red line. If I'm too steep, it's going to be trouble. Now the second part of this question is, well, does that mean that across the line at the top is okay? Well, yes, it's perfectly fine as long as I shallow it out below that red line as I get to start the downswing. So players like Fred Couples, Jack Nicklaus, early Tiger Woods, like we were talking about, all those players that are a little across the line at the top still get that club head below that red line as they start their downswing. Let me exaggerate, or I'm going to attempt to be across the line at the top and make this same move in my own swing so you can see how this would look. And we'll take a look at this slow motion video here also. All right, so another one, right down the left center of the fairway, pretty daggone straight. And I was across the line. We'll see from that slow motion that even though I was across, I still shallowed that club out. And then finally, if I'm laid off at the top of the swing, that's completely fine too. The goal is to get that club at the start of the downswing working in the correct position in relationship to my hands. I can do that from a shallow position too. Typically I don't have a very shallow swing, or I'm not very laid off at the top, but I'll give it a whirl, see if I can do my best here. There we go, that felt really weird to me. Probably not my best swing because it felt it felt a little odd to me, but I can still hit the ball pretty well going from that position. So whether you're across the line, on plane, or laid off, all those are completely fine as long as you shallow that club out early in the transition. All right, shallowing that club. We see these pros getting this club perfectly shallow as they're starting their downswing. Everything's nice and in the slot. From there, all we have to do is turn through as hard as you can. It's going to deliver the club very consistently and very powerfully through the golf ball. We see the pros up and down the PGA Tour all doing this very, very similarly. So why is it so daggone hard for most players to get that club shallow? If shallowing the club is so much easier to strike the ball well, wouldn't we all just be shallowing the club? How does that get started? That's exactly what I'm going to talk about in this video. I'm going to talk about why almost all players struggle getting steep, where that originally comes from, and how that develops throughout the swing. And then I'm going to give you a surefire way to shallow the club that actually has nothing to do with the angle of this shaft that'll help it to start happening more naturally. Let's go and get started. All right, so let's jump right into it. Now the reason we want to shallow, the reason this is so good, when this club shallows out kind of below the direction our hands are moving, so kind of imagine a plane that our hands are moving down, or an angle our hands are moving down. If I can get that club shallower than that, that's set my club up on a great angle to where now as I'm coming through contact, I can be very consistent. So you can imagine a plane of glass. This isn't exactly what's happening, but it's a good visual for your mind. If I imagine this plane of glass, if I can get that club set on that plane of glass and rotate through and release on that plane of glass as I'm coming on through, that can really help the consistency of my golf shots. So how do we get off of this? If that's so good, it seems like everybody would just start right from the beginning, releasing on that plane of glass. And I think most players do actually start somewhat kind of on that angle. They start similar to this plane of glass, but what ends up happening is we don't know how to release the face yet. So if I have this visual in my mind when I'm very first beginning golf, and this is the same way I started, I bet you started the same way too. If I'm just going to swing this club and pull the handle of the club toward the target as hard as I can, what ends up happening is if I swing nice and shallow and on plane, because I'm dragging this handle toward the target, look at my face, it's wide open. So if I hit a shot like this, you'll notice I'll be nice and shallow, but I'll have the idea of just pulling my handle toward the target as hard as I can. I'm probably going to have a big block slice. Hopefully I don't hit a house on the right side. I'll try to tone it down a little bit. Oh geez, that's way over there. Sorry to the neighbors. Hopefully I didn't hit anything. But I had it nice and shallow. I pulled the handle toward the target, and now the club face is wide open. So even if you start out shallowing out the club, you start out on the right track, you get some pretty negative feedback right away when that ball goes 45, 50 yards to the right and then slices even more. That's the way everybody starts. So from there, we say, okay, what can I do to fix that? Well, instead of doing the correct way, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, which has to do what we're doing in the handle, the natural inclination is to say, okay, I'm going to come over the top, and now I'll start to get a little steeper and over the top, and I get that ball, again, I'm not getting rid of the slice, but I'm taking that slice and I'm moving it over to the left side. So now it starts down the left side in the left rough, it slices back into the middle of the fairway, and I'm hitting the ball in play at least. So I went from on plane, dragging the club out of bounds. My fix actually made my swing worse. Now I started to come steep and over the top, but I got the ball in play. So it's giving me kind of positive feedback. And as you continue to get better, you probably get some lessons saying, okay, we got this big slice now, let's get rid of this thing. So instead of taking that steeper swing and shallowing it out, we end up taking that steep swing. We can imagine that plane of glass kind of coming this way, or that swing direction coming this way, and we're steep. We end up just tilting all that to the inside. And now we're steep and coming inside out and trying to release that club and flip with our hands to release the club. So in all three of those variations, we've kind of made manipulations that have got around from the main thing that we should be working on. We started out on plane with the face wide open. We fixed that by coming steeping over the top. And then we fixed that by dropping that inside. We're still steep, but now we're flipping the hand. So what's the one piece that's missing from all three of these scenarios? And that's how to square the club up properly with the hands. And that's exactly what I'm going to go over next in this drill. All right, so now let's go through the progression. And again, to recap on this, the only way I can come in on plane is to make sure that I square this face up. And that squaring of the face comes from rotating this handle. So if I'm looking from down the line, here's my club face straight up and down. Here's the butt end of my club, and if I'm rotating that just like a clock face rotating, you see how that opens and closes the face. Now if I'm used to, that's one way to open and close the face. Another way to open and close the face is by moving my wrist backwards and forwards, kind of flipping my wrist. So a lot of players get into the habit of flipping to go ahead and close that face. You see, the more I flip, the more that face closes. The more I have my hands this way like we started, the more that face is open. So we all get into the habit of opening and closing the face by doing this rather than twisting and rotating the face that way. So let's combat that by learning how to square the face through that rotation. Then we can bring it on naturally, much more simply, much more naturally onto the plane in the downswing or on plane. So let's start by going to the top of the swing. What I want you to do is go ahead and go to the top and relax your arms. You don't have to be tight here. But I want you to imagine, again, this clock face. If we can rotate that, what would be to my right, the logo of my left hand going up toward the sky, the palm of my right hand going up toward the sky, my knuckles kind of rotating this way, that would be closing the face. So you see, as I came on down, that would be a closed club face. As I come through, that would be closing it to where it would be promoting much more of a hook or a draw. So I want you to do 20 reps. Just go to the top of your swing, do 4 or 5, feeling like you rotate that face closed, rotate it closed again. Get used to that feeling of rotating it closed, and then come back down to the bottom of the swing. So you're gonna do 4 or 5, get the feeling of that, and then go ahead and swing on through. What you'll notice is you'll have a sensation that face is really closing down, so now it's easier to get that club shallow and from the inside, and you don't have to worry about it going to the right at all. So we're gonna start out doing reps of 5, closing, 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 and then swinging through. Do a good 20 reps or however many it takes you to feel comfortable with that. Then let's pause halfway down. I want to go just halfway down my swing, pause when the club's about parallel with the ground, and now let's close that face again 3, 4, 5 times until you get the feeling of that. Start opening the hips like you would in the golf swing, and then go ahead and feel like you swing on through to get that nice draw. Let's do the opposite here for a second so you can feel the other extreme. If I come down this way and I open this face, open, open, now there's 2 things that I could do to square this up. I could start to come over the top, or I could flip my hands to try to save it. That open position is not going to be good. I need that club face to be square and closing as I'm making my downswing. So again, 4 or 5 reps, swing on through to get the feel for that. Once I've done those, I've felt the club face start to rotate at the top of the swing. I've felt the club face start to rotate at the bottom of the swing. Now it's starting to make complete sense how I could get the club in here on the slot and still get that face squared up as I'm coming through contact. So your final reps, do 4 or 5 reps where now you get the club in here, really exaggerate that wrist action, that rotating of the club, and you're gonna feel completely comfortable getting the club way back in here and being comfortable that ball is gonna turn over from right to left as you're doing that. So let's do at least 5 reps at a time, maybe 20 reps to get comfortable at the top, 20 down here at the bottom, and let's do another 20, shallowing that club out and pairing all that together. If you can do all those, now you're gonna feel much more comfortable with how that club has to move, and you're gonna hit that great draw right from the slot. All right, so let's build on this here today. I have an awesome bonus video for you that's gonna build on the feelings that you started here today. It's called the tennis racket drill. So we're actually gonna hold a tennis racket and it's gonna exaggerate even more what you're feeling here to get used to squaring that face up so you can come from the inside, drop that club in the slot. It's gonna make it so much easier. I'm gonna play a preview of that here in a second. All you need to do is click the iCard that pops up on the screen or the link down below in the description. You'll get instant access to that. Let's go and get started with the tennis racket drill. Good player problems. We're going to talk about shallowing that club shaft out as we're starting down, as we're doing this rotating of the face that we worked on in the last video. As we start this downswing, what you'll see with basically all of the top players is instead of coming kind of over the top and letting the hands come out away from their body, letting the club come out away from their body, again coming down steep into the ball and then having to open up, kind of fillet open the face and add loft to it, the flattening of the shaft should happen as soon as we start down. So as we start this downswing, what we want to have happening here, you can imagine that if I draw a line from the hosel of my club up through my right elbow, that's my swing plane line, my elbow plane. As I go to the top of the swing, I'm going to be slightly above that. And then as I start down, I want my hands to start to shallow out. I want the club to shallow out inside of this elbow plane. And at the same time, I'm going to be rotating my